Welcome to the Fellowship Podcast, a place where we have gospel conversations about loving God and transforming lives by following Jesus through life-on-life relationships. Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to the Fellowship Podcast. Thanks for being here, Jayten.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be
Jayten
here.
is our youth pastor in charge of discipling and bringing up the youth of tomorrow, which are really the youth of today. And so, Jayten, tell us a little bit about yourself, your calling, kind of what brought you to Fellowship Church. Give us like a little short synopsis of this. How'd you end up in that chair?
Sure. So, I drove myself here and sat down. That's how I got in this chair. But no,
Were you carried in by fairies or anything?
No, nothing like
No?
that.
Okay.
Nothing too supernatural other than the Holy Spirit. But that's about it. No, but I grew up in a really small town called Cross Plains, Texas, where I had an amazing youth pastor. Just a young college guy that came in and poured into us and poured into me in a way that really just changed my life. And he was very influential in how God grew in me and how Christ really changed my heart and changed my desires. And as I got into high school, I was like, I think I want to do youth ministry. Like I want to do what he's been doing. But he and I are vastly different, kind of like you and I are very different.
Yeah.
Like he was into basketball and he was really tall and he was cool and I I'm this. But I really like felt God tugging on my heart, like youth ministry, like going in and like doing things like that. And so once I got into college, I had a few internships and then I got my first job at a really small church plant around 2015, 2014. And we just went from there. And here I am now. I was in Dripping Springs before I was here doing youth ministry there. And I interviewed with you guys. I heard about the job through some friends and here I am now and I've been loving it. It's been so good to pour into the kids here at Fellowship and these teenagers. They've had a lot of good upbringing before me through other youth pastors, you being one of the main sources of greatness that I've just seen. And they've grown a lot already before I even got here. So I kind of came into a very healthy and strong group.
Yeah, and if people that are watching don't know my background, I was a youth pastor for 27 years and started with 4 youth and it began to grow at my previous church and they came here, we had 12 and now I think on an average now at Refuge it's like 85, 86 kids and 20 adult helpers each week and that's quite a jump. Like huge. I know you were doing about 25 kids in Dripping Springs and then you came here and it's like I have that many leaders,
right?
Then let alone kids. What's been the biggest adjustment for you in coming to the big leagues or just coming to a group that's a lot more established and bigger?
It was definitely a huge change for me. I've spent a lot of time learning about those changes as I've been here, but I think the biggest change for me was having a team that I could rely on. I've before this at the other churches I was at, it was me and I was running the show and I was running small groups. I was doing everything and I was taking whatever help I could get from whoever could step in on that Wednesday. But here it's the biggest difference is delegating is saying like, hey, like, okay, Jayten doesn't have to take care of every small group. There are people who know what they're doing, who can take care of these kids. And I've been incredibly grateful for that in that, when you do start getting more numbers in a youth group of 15 or 20, I can have a conversation with every student and spend that time with them every time they walk in the door. But when you start getting into what we have here, which is, 80, sometimes 90 kids, I can't talk to every single one of them. I can't make time for every single one of them. It's impossible unless I just want to just dedicate 2 minutes to each student and then I won't have time to teach. I won't have time to do anything.
Yeah, that's 3 hours.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
If you spend 2 minutes with each kid, that's 3 hours of you just getting a snippet with it. But every kid that comes to Refuge has an opportunity each week to get poured into by an adult discipler. And I think that's just an amazing way that it all kind of fits together. But when you're young in youth ministry, I think you're a little hesitant on bringing in help. I know I was. I don't know if you were, but I was a kind of lone ranger. Maybe I wanted to be the hero of everybody's story, or maybe I wanted to be the star of the show. But man, God has just really shown me over the years that you got to have that help to really love on and encourage these kids in such a hard time of life. What is the biggest benefit you see of having other adult leaders coming in? Because we might have some people watching that are young in youth ministry and they're nervous about bringing people into the craziness, which is youth group. What do you see as some of the greatest benefits of that?
It's absolutely in relationship building. Like I said, there are kids who are going to fall between the cracks if it's just me. And I would say even in a group that's not as big as ours, there is so much good in bringing in other people who love students and bringing in other people who can step up because we're not meant to be Superman. Like the youth pastor is not Superman, and we're most certainly not Jesus.
Mhm.
We sometimes want to be. I think kind of pridefully. I'm like you. Like when I stepped in here, I was like, I've been doing this on my own. I know what I'm doing. And very quickly I learned, no, I don't. I don't know what I'm doing. And even if I was at a smaller church now, like I wouldn't go back to the way it was. I would not go back to it's just Jayten. I'm just figuring it out as I go. Like I will always want a team like I have here. That's been one of the greatest benefits of just seeing relationship building. Like recently we had a kind of a prayer moment after we talked about salvation and being able to just place leaders around the room for students to go and get prayer and to talk about salvation. I couldn't have talked to that many kids. I couldn't have even dreamed of talking to those students, all of them in that night. And so leaders are there to step up and do that and learning how to delegate that and learning how to be okay with the fact that I love that student. I didn't get to have that amazing gospel conversation with them, but somebody I trusted did and somebody who loves them did. And that is just as good, if not better, than having that with me. And so that's been really good.
That's a reminder to us that it's not about us,
Mhm.
right? Which every Christian leader needs to be humble. And sometimes we can let ourselves become that star. And so having that humility and the lack of competitiveness to be encouraging
Mhm.
those conversations. And I think of this often. If you had just one line of people wanting to talk to you about salvation, first of all, you wouldn't spend as much time with each student
Right.
as needed. And second of all, some wouldn't come up. I don't want to be the eighth in line where as they see their leaders that they have a relationship already with, they're like, that person knows me
Right.
and they're going to be overjoyed to have this conversation with me. And that allows access to the gospel message even more than one person can be.
Well, it's like Jesus sending out the 12. Not again, I'm not Jesus, you're not Jesus, none of us are, but you see that as he sends out the 12, like they were capable. He gave them
Mhm.
the spirit, he gave them the power to go out and do that. And that's a lot of what it looks like is like even Jesus didn't do this alone. And so like he trusted his disciples, he trusted people to go out and share that gospel and to do that. And so if it was good enough for Jesus, it has to be good enough for us.
Yeah, and who knows who the next leaders are going to have a call in their life to do something, and they have that experience, and
Exactly.
we have that experience of sending out, people to be youth pastors and be lead pastors around the area, which is a beautiful thing to do. Where they may not have done that if they hadn't had that opportunity.
Mhm.
And what's the hardest thing
No.
about having a group of adults that is all around them? And I could tell you stories because I was doing youth ministry here for 14 years
Sure.
before you came in, and I got my own story. What do you think is the biggest kind of challenge about that?
My biggest challenge personally has just been learning how to lead leaders. Like I said, I didn't have this beforehand. But with adults, there comes opinions, and with adults, there comes differences in thoughts and how we do things because some of these people are raising kids. So some of these leaders have children of their own. And anytime you get different people in a room together, there's going to be different like theories on how we should do this and how we should go. Um, and so that always comes into play. I will say one great thing about the team we have right now is they are very trusting. Like, and they understand. They're like, I trust Jayten's leadership on this, even though some of them are like 20 years older than I am. They will say like, what do you think we should do? And they kind of go with that. But you never know. And there's going to be times where I disappoint people in my leadership or in a decision I make. And so I've always thought about this, and I had a pastor tell me once that sometimes ministry looks like disappointing people at an acceptable rate. Like you're not going to be able to please everybody, but just don't go out of your way to upset people. But that's sometimes how youth ministry feels is like I know you want it to go this way. We can't, or I'm unable to make that happen, but we're going to go this way and we're going to hopefully make it good. And so I would say one of the hard things is just it is a group of adults that you're trying to lead, and you're also pouring into teenagers who don't always make life the easiest and pouring into them the easiest. And so there's a little bit of disappointment that can come with that, but it's all worth it. That's the beauty of it is that even in the hard things, this is absolutely worth it to see like teenagers fall in love with Jesus.
Yeah, now I would rephrase your question or that the statement that pastor gave you is leading without the fear of disappointing people.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, when you have that leadership and God's put you in that leadership
Mhm.
position, you got to lead the best way you can with the information that you have at that
Right.
moment, that place, and that time.
Right.
And that's what we do
Mhm.
as leaders is surely step out there and yeah, people are going to be disappointed sometimes, but it's not for lack of us trying to do what we
Right.
think is best. And that way, and I would agree with you. I think the biggest challenge that you have is unity.
Mhm.
Taking a group of diverse people and bringing them into a sense of unity and calling. That's where a common mission,
Mhm.
that's where a common goal of discipleship really it's not you, it's this
Right.
calling.
Yep.
I don't want you to be loyal to me. I want you to be loyal to the calling, which
Mhm.
I was so encouraged with our youth group because our youth group went through a lot of turmoil,
Mhm.
right? With having a youth pastor leave, and then I had to step in for a while, and then we had hired a previous youth pastor who ended up being here only 4 months, and then I stepped back in again, and then you came in, and so it's like one, two, three, fourth guy coming in.
Right.
Can we trust him
Yeah.
or not? But so many of the kids understood that it was not about me.
Right.
It wasn't about you. It's
Mhm.
about this is what refuge is. And that's what we call our youth ministry. Refuge is this. And so many of these kids had seen great examples in the years before them
Mhm.
that when they saw, oh, this is going on, they were willing to jump in. And so that brings me to another kind of question. You're coming into a youth group that was pretty established. And even though that 4 month stint was a little different, as soon as I stepped back in, it was like riding a bike again.
Right.
The kids just, went back into the same, this is
Mhm.
what refuge is. But you're coming in with your own ideas about youth ministry.
Right.
And here's Chris Smith, Refuge, who's also the lead pastor and your boss,
Yeah.
right? Coming in,
No pressure.
no pressure, but I'm sure there's things that you want to do a little bit different, but then there's things that are going well. How did you navigate that? You're doing a great job,
Thank
and
you.
then and the youth and the adults love you and love all the things that you're doing. What was it like coming into a boat that was already moving? Like you're kind of like running beside it and jumping into the
Right.
boat, hoping not to miss and
Yeah.
belly flop in the water. Like what was that transition like?
That was a huge transition for me. Most of the jobs that I've stepped into have been almost revivals of a youth ministry. I'm really good at pushing the boat into the water. Is
Okay.
is what I have found at the my I think the last 3 youth ministry positions I took needed that push. They needed someone to step in or kinda heal from a bad experience, and y'all were already like you said, y'all were already in the water, y'all are already swimming, y'all are in the boat, you're going, and so for me, it looked a lot like, "Okay, what do I need to do now?" Like, this isn't about revitalization because, like, there's life here. So what does that mean for me? And so kinda stepping into this role, one of the things I learned really quickly was, okay, like, this group doesn't need milk. Like, they're ready for big boy food. Like, they're ready to eat, and so, like, I've really been able to just stretch my teaching and my time where I'm just pouring out the word and they can handle it. And even when new students walk in, like, one of the great things is we're unashamed of the word here.
Amen.
We're unashamed of what that looks like, and so me stepping into this youth group at first was kind of intimidating because, like, well, they know what they're doing. And, you had mentioned, like, some of the students kinda realize, like, "Hey, we've had a lot of people come in and out of this." And so some of the students didn't immediately take to me. There are some students whose trust I needed to earn, and that's a beautiful thing because,
Mhm.
in college, I heard this phrase, and it's always stuck with me. People don't care about how much you know until they know how much you care. And that was a lot of these students. Like, they wanted to see, like, he's not just here for a job, he's also not gonna leave in a few months. And, I've been here for more than a few months, like, it's been a little bit more at least, and that's been really great to see those students that were a little hesitant at first, who are now just bought in. They're helping with small groups, they're doing things, they're leading, at their schools and in their families, and so that's been a really big thing where, like, me being able to step in to a group that's already going was that, "All right, Jayton, it's time to match their pace, not set the pace, and then we can start changing a few things here and there." That I learned like when you're going into any ministry, you can't come in with a flamethrower and burn it all to the ground and say, "This is how we're going to do it. We're going to do it different." Especially when something's working well,
Right.
which Refuge was before I got here. And so that's been a really big encouragement of I can just come in with a flashlight and just shine some light on some things that might need to change. And as we see those little things, we're like, hey, like this worked really well for Chris Smith. I'm not Chris Smith.
Yeah.
I'm Jayten Ames. And so this worked really well for Chris. Like I'm going to change this a little bit, but this is still going to be Refuge. This is still going to be a safe, biblical, gospel driven place where students can come and meet Jesus and know him. And so that's been one of the greatest encouragements is I didn't need to come in with a flamethrower. I didn't have to push the boat into the water. I could come in and find something that was already healthy and just continue to tend to it.
And steer, right? You're really jumping in and steering something that's already moving. And one of the things that I think we did really well, pat on the back for us, was when we went to Fuge this summer, which is our version of youth camp.
Right.
We were very purposeful in. I started out kind of as the leader, and as the week went on, I started disappearing more, and you started taking the lead more.
Right.
And even like silly little things like in costumes, we're that church that dresses up in all these incredible, fun, exciting ways, culminating in Noah's Ark at the end.
Right.
Just hey, I'm passing this off to you, and this is you now. This is your leader now, and the kids really seeing that I'm 100% behind you. I'm so excited about you being here and taking over this ministry, and I'm purposely not showing up to youth things, or I'm purposely staying distant in some of those things so that as you're established more and more as a leader. But it wasn't like, Jayden's here, see ya,
bye,
I'm out, I'm out. It was more like that, racing. And this is what we did as a church whenever I became a lead pastor, and Jonathan Leftwich and I preached together for a full month. Both up on stage, both saying part of the sermon at the same time. And it was like handing that baton off, where there's a moment where both of you had the baton and then you take off running. And I think that was a beautiful way for the kids to understand they didn't have to feel bad if they liked you more than me.
Sure.
Right? They didn't have to feel bad that I kind of like the way Jayten does things better than the way Chris did. Almost like I was the rescuer coming in after times. And now, no, it's like, I want them to fall more in love with you and Amy and the team. And so I think that was something that the kids really resonated with, and you could see that week of growth.
Right.
Then God almost took you home, but that's a whole other story.
That's a story for another time.
But I think that was a beautiful thing that, have you felt loved like that by people or felt supported like that?
Here at this church? Absolutely. Yes. And I would even say vice versa for, with you, like there are students who prefer Coach's youth ministry, but the way that you handled it and the way that we were able to kind of handle that was that like, this is still Refuge. Like this is not like, we are not changing things to such a degree that you're not going to recognize your youth group anymore. And so that was really great. And that like, hey, like, it's okay. Like that you love Coach a lot. Like he's still around. He's still your pastor. He's not going anywhere, but it was also a really healthy transition where I felt supported in like, you are the youth pastor now, like you were doing this, but yes, I felt so incredibly loved by this church. And I've been blessed. Like that has not always been the case at some churches. But my last church and this church here, especially, like just feel supported and loved. And people ask like, what do you need? When Amy and I did have our baby, there was so much that just went on with that, but there was never a moment where we felt alone. There was never a moment in that time where we just felt like it's just us. We're gonna have to figure this out on our own. We feel like we have family here. And like I feel supported by the staff, like you and Paul and everybody. Just I feel like I'm on a team and a family. It's not just, hey, we have to do ministry together. It's we get to, and we actually enjoy it. Like I actually really enjoy being on this team, and so it's a really great spot. And yes, I feel incredibly loved.
Yeah, you've been amazing at being open with the staff and being able to share. Hey, will you guys pray for me in this? Or hey, I'm struggling this week. Will you pray for this? Or hey, having a newborn baby is really hard.
Yeah.
Can you help me cover this thing or that thing? And I just think it's been a really good picture for our staff. And I was actually talking to Paul about this on one of the podcasts. Man, isn't it amazing to be friends and coworkers? And that sometimes it's hard to be friends inside of a staff because you think, well, am I going to really share with my boss that I'm really struggling in this area because he might think da 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 da. My job depends on, when actuality, and the beauty of being in the church is that when you're transparent, and that's one of the things that Paul said in that podcast, was that transparency is a major staff win, where you're being open with struggles before you get busted in something.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes such a difference in, like, we're for you. We want to see you do well. You always know that our house is open at any point to come over and do whatever God needs you to do in those things. And you can call me out. If I'm out of line, you're willing to do that, and I'm willing to do that with you. And
Right.
so that's a neat dynamic to have that's inside of growing friendships, along with, we're rowing the boat together.
Right.
And if you're not feeling well, the boat's going to get off course, right?
You'll be able to tell even if I don't
Yeah.
tell you I'm not doing well. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one of the cool things is like that vulnerability leads to authenticity, and that authenticity breeds community. And that's what it feels like here. It's a community, and it's great. And I love that I can be honest and open. I love that I can say, hey, I'm not doing well with this. I'm not doing okay, because I think the tendency for a lot of pastors or anybody working in a church is I have got to be perfect. Even though I'm not, I have to look perfect.
Yeah.
And I love that I can get up even on stage in front of my students and say, like, I struggle here. Like, I'm teaching you about this, but hey, pot, meet, kettle. I'm right there with you in this. And so, like, being able to say that and have that safety, not even just among the staff, but among the church itself. Like, I don't have to be your perfect pastor. I can be Jayten Ames, who struggles just like you do. And we're going to try to lead. And am I being held to a higher standard? Yes, biblically, absolutely. There should be a fight, but that's why we are honest. Is so, like, hey, I need to live up to this. And if I don't talk about this, if I don't bring this out in the open, I won't.
And you're not fighting alone.
Exactly.
And that's the key. I mean, I love reading fiction books about just young people struggling to win. And man, shield wall means that you're not the only shield in it. There's other people around to help cover your back when you have that. And now we pat ourselves on the back a second ago, but we haven't always been good at youth ministry. I know I haven't. So what is the just most absurd thing you'll never do again that you're like, hey, if you're a young youth pastor, don't do this.
Yeah.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
Like, don't put a Happy Meal in blender and call it the Happy Shake. That's just, it's not good. It's not good. Don't bob for spam, even though that was actually kind of fun, to be honest with you.
Goodness.
Bobbing for spam, because the little gelatin would get on top of the water in the cooler. But I wasn't bobbing in it. So
yes.
Anyway, what are some of the I don't know if dumb is the right word for it, but what are some of the things that I can't not believe I did that?
Oh man, I have one that was just a disaster. I have one that was just, I can't believe I did this. I can't believe, why did I do this? I put on my own camp once, which was a blast, so much fun. And we rented out a house, like this huge house that would sleep like 40 people. We took about 35 people, I think, and it said this will sleep 40 people. We get to the house and there's only 20 beds. So it'll sleep 20 couples. And so I've got like 30 students, and it's like, okay, who's going to have to bunk up together? And these are all like separate rooms, and it's all this stuff. And I brought maybe 5 leaders with me. And I did not know at the time what was going on, but I found out later on that kids were sneaking into each other's rooms and just, doing things teenagers do. And I was devastated for at least a few months after learning that. And this was years. I'm not even at that church anymore. This was years later that I found this out. And it still makes me sick to my stomach just thinking, like, why didn't I check? Why didn't I find out that this was happening? And it was just, it just, anytime now when I'm like looking at anything with housing or anything like that, I'm like, okay, how many beds? Not how many does it sleep? How many beds are there? How many kids can I logistically take to where I'm not having to worry about this? That was, what a mess. What a horrible mess.
No, I've been there. I mean, I think about things we used to do at lock-ins where it was like, okay, everybody hide. And then someone's going to come find you, right? And how many couples went to hide? And I'm thinking, what was I thinking? Or I remember my first year. I remember when I was younger going to Glorietta.
Mhm.
Like it was the camp to go to. And so when I became a youth pastor, I was like, we're going to go to Glorietta in the summer. And I remember I just wanted to bring as many kids as I could, even kids I didn't know, um, family members from another place. And so when I took a group of kids to camp, we took, I think it was around 16, 17 kids, 4 leaders.
Mhm.
Miss Geroy was
Yeah.
one of the leaders in that first trip, and Tara and I, and Miss McBride. There were all these. I was the only guy and 3 female leaders, and we went to this camp with, I think it was 12 kids we didn't know and 4 that were in our youth group. And the things that happened, they toilet papered a 50-foot tall pine tree. I didn't sleep hardly at all because they kept trying to sneak out to go hook up with different people in different dorms.
Did you have
I
to sleep at the door?
I slept at the
Yep.
door. I They found them one time with sheets tied together, trying to climb out of the second story bathroom window. Then I had let our secretary, one of the sweetest people I know and friends, she just found the cheapest hotel in Sweetwater, Texas, which turned out to be like the drug pimp
Oh,
hotel of the town. And I had a drug guy knocking on the girl's door trying to get in. I slept outside again
oh my
to
gosh.
try to protect them. HBO had a special on that night in the guys' room, and they had been offered beer by the room right next to them. And then at the end of the night, they shot off a fire extinguisher
Oh
in the hotel room,
gosh.
causing $200 damage. That was my first youth trip that I took, and I thought, I don't know, I almost stepped out of ministry. I almost got KO'd at
Those
that.
camps, man.
And it
Some of
was
those
like, and
experiences.
that's why it's like, I will not take a kid who hasn't been to at least 4 or 5 things. I
Right.
won't do this. I won't do. All of a sudden, these rules that really have benefited me over the rest of my ministry. When you're bringing 75, you can't bring 50 you don't know. You're in a different state,
Wow.
and so
Yeah.
all those lessons I learned, I'm thankful that I got those lessons. But oh my goodness, I can't believe I thought that I could just do it.
Right.
We can do it. And
Yeah.
oh my
I
goodness.
also learned don't force a kid to go if they've telling you like I don't want to go to camp. It's like you're going to camp. I took a group of 6, my first youth group, a group of 6 to Florida, and I had one kid who always came on Wednesdays, but he's like I do not want to go to the beach. I do not want to go to Florida for a week. Don't make me do this. And I was like, you're coming. You're gonna have a blast because I had a blast. That's the camp I grew up going
Yeah.
to, and he was miserable the whole time, and I like just unhappy, just grumpy. Did not like get involved with anything, and I could not blame him because that was my fault. I
Mhm.
forced him to come to youth camp,
Yeah.
and he did not wanna go, but it was hard to have that conversation of, "Hey, man, I need you to cheer up," and he's just like, "I want to go home. Do not make me be here anymore," and so, yeah, a lot of lessons to learn, and you learn them mostly at camp.
Yeah. Camp is like the microphone
Mm,
for those things where the volume is turned up in so many ways.
yeah.
What's the best thing you've done? What is the best youth group thing that you've done that you'd say I would do this every year if I could?
We had an event, called Abide, which was like our fall like here at Fellowship, which was our fall retreat weekend kind of thing. And I purposefully made it the opposite of Immerse, which because we do Immerse, which is something I think you established
Mhm.
Immerse, which is like a spring and it's loud and it's fun and like you stay overnight and you do all these fun things and it's incredible. It's an incredible experience. I wanted Abide to essentially still be incredible, but the opposite in ways of we get immersed, but what does it mean to abide, to rest in the Lord, to know
Mhm.
Him? And it's a lot more slow paced. And we do this thing that my youth pastor did, and his youth pastor did it before him, called the prayer chair, where you get everyone in the circle, and then you sit someone in the middle, and the person who volunteers themselves to go sit in the middle just says, "This is what I need prayer for." And I always encourage students, I need at least 3 people to pray for them. Like, let's stand up, surround them, put hands on them. I need at least 3 people to pray for them, but without fail, it's always more than 3. And it's almost surprising the people who will pray for somebody, like, people you wouldn't expect to pray for someone like Joel Geroy, um, would pray for somebody that maybe I didn't even know they knew each other, but they're praying for each other now. That experience is always incredible. That is also one of those stories where it could go incredibly wrong. I have stories like that with the prayer chair, but when the prayer chair goes well, when they use it for what it's made for, God just moves. And it really is a picture of like, let's weep with those who weep. Let's rejoice with those who rejoice. And um, students have a lot to share, but they don't often do it. But if you give them a place to do it safely and a place where they trust, they will open up. Because that kind of authenticity doesn't really exist in their worlds right now. And so I love seeing that. That's probably one of my favorite things that I've done with any youth group, but it went especially well here where I was just like, man, we've got to do this again next year. And so yeah, that's been a really big one for me.
Yeah, one of mine similar to that would be we had what we called garage worship one
Mhm.
time. We had a small retreat just focused on leaders
Right.
because I wanted the leaders to be discipling people underneath of them, and started worship at like 11 p.m. and just YouTube on a projector in the garage, summer in Texas.
Yeah.
So it was hot and it was sweaty and it was 3 a.m. before we stopped worshiping.
Wow.
And just, the Spirit of God just showed up and we're praying for one another and people are confessing sin. And the whole time we're singing and we left hoarse, sweaty, and full of Spirit. And it
Yeah.
was just a beautiful, unscripted
Mhm.
moment that was so sweet. But as far as like for me, one of the ideas that God gave me that I think is one of the best things was at camp. The things like dressing up the same, right? Having theme days that create this unity, and then that night prayer groups where it was a senior with a sophomore, with a freshman, with a junior high kid, where
Mhm.
a seventh grader would go, that senior knows my name. Like that's gold in a public school when a junior high kid has an upperclassman that knows them, is like, don't mess with them.
Huge.
That's my boy.
Yeah.
That's huge for their confidence and their
Mhm.
leadership. And then in a few years, they're going to be like, I remember when, you know, Brandon Clark said hi to me.
Mhm.
And I want that to happen with other
Absolutely.
people, and all of a sudden you create this momentum in your group of unity, of making leaders lead and developing leadership and discipleship, and then that opens up that vulnerable state of I can trust this person to speak to about what's going on in my life, because today's youth I think are so different than when I was in school, because
Mhm.
the temptations, and probably even than you in school, the temptations they face now are so much more intense, and the consequences they face are so much more intense than what we did. I mean, fentanyl, one pill, dead. You know, social media and the pressures and
God.
cyberbullying,
Yeah.
pornography, and the things that are just so addicting in our society. What do you see being a frontline youth guy as being the number one issues that our kids, teens face?
You know, I in college they taught us like youth ministry changes with each generation. And it's true. Like it was different when you were a youth. It's different than I was. It was different when I was a youth. And even now that they're going through things that I couldn't fathom. And a lot of it, and I'm not trying to sound like a grumpy old guy, is because it's all through their phone.
Mhm.
Cell phones are a completely different beast because that is not only what they're getting access through almost everything through. That is what we're competing with. Like, that is what church is competing with, and if we're not offering something that they consider better than their phone, why don't I just stay home then? Like, I can get all of this. I can get all my entertainment, I can get all my joy, I can get all my excitement through this little device that fits in the palm of my hand. That to me is not the enemy, but in a way, yes, one of the biggest enemies to youth ministry is just that cell phone, and everything that you can access through it. Because we've talked about this, like porn is 2 clicks away.
Mhm.
That person that gets you fentanyl, hey, I got their number. If I need a fix, if I need this stuff, if I need any drugs, I know who to call. I know who to
Yeah, go to
text.
the C Hall, room 104,
Yeah.
and they'll be there right after school every day. Like,
Exactly, exactly. They're all connected through their phone, and communication's great. Cell phones are not inherently evil, just like money's not inherently evil. but what are you using it for? What is its purpose? Is it sitting on the throne of your heart? And so that to me is one of the biggest challenges we have is encouraging students like, hey, hang up, hang
Yep.
up for a bit. Come be here. Come look at me in the face and in the eyes and have a conversation with me.
But I think the temptation for people is thinking, well, I got to out entertain the cell phone.
Hmm.
Right? There is a movement in youth group, and actually, I think kind of a stigma that's over youth ministry is that. But if I sit them in youth ministry, they're just going to play games and be entertained. And there's nothing deep, and there probably are those kind of groups out there. They're going to try to overly entertain and give away things and trap people in it. But when in actuality, what they really want is truth.
Yeah.
What they really want is authentic relationships. What they really want is a place that they can be them
Exactly.
and people are still going to love them. And instead of creating this overly entertaining place that's going to compete with cell phones, it's like, no, face to face interaction is what you're missing. You're missing sitting across with someone and seeing their facial expression and seeing their body language and seeing how they love the Lord. And they're missing that truth that can only be found through God's word. And so, like for our model, is there's games and social time and fellowship, which part of what we talked about with Chris Cherry on our podcast was, Bible, prayer, and fellowship being what discipleship really is. And so we have that fellowship time. They get to hang out with friends and there's fun and games, but then there's worship. There's this connection with God that hopefully is going to wash away some of the things that have happened in their life. And then there's Bible teaching.
Right.
And not Bible teaching, and I know you're this way as well. It's not Bible teaching to the lowest level of people in the house.
Right.
There is always a gospel component, but it's teaching them about God's word, walking through God's word or the armor of God or the fruit of the Spirit. And so they'll truly understand this is God's expectation for my life. You may not want to try to meet it, but God's expectation for you is don't rely on addiction for happiness, right? Rely on the Lord. And that challenge that we can put out to them is then reinforced with small group time afterwards. And I've heard people say this before. I don't know if you hear this. When I talk to other youth pastors, they'll say, there's no way the parents would allow me to have 6:30 to 9 on a Wednesday night. There's no way it's a school night. There's no, they can't let me do it. I'm like, they will.
Yeah.
No way. Listen, I have 85 that come every week and they won't get picked up till 10.
Yeah.
10:30.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the parents see an authentic change in their kids. They see them now reading their Bible. They see them making wise choices. And what would you pay for your kids to make wise choices? Right. What would you pay for your kids to have good influences in their life instead of bad influences in their life? What you're willing to invest your time in, your kids are going to feed off of that.
Exactly.
So if you're like, well, you can't do youth group, but you can watch this Marvel movie for 2.5 hours.
Right.
Marvel entertainment's more important than Jesus.
Right.
And I don't know. I haven't had any pushback from a 6:30 to 9 p.m. youth group every Wednesday of life.
that was one of the most excited. That's ridiculous. But I was very, very excited coming here, hearing I get 2.5 hours, rather even just an extra hour than what I was used to. I was like, I can do so much more with that. I'm not time crunched with this. Like I can teach for as long as I want, which some of the students are probably like, I wish you would teach a little shorter. I can teach for as long as I want. We can do worship. We can do these things. And there's still time for more. And like, that's what's been so great. And I agree. Like, I think the students' lives are so curated. Like everything, like walking through the hallways, like going to work, you have to give this image of perfection. And especially on social media, it's like, I can't be authentic on social media. I have got to look a certain way and present this life. And I took 1 million pictures today, but only 5 of them are worth posting and things like that. And so I think when they finally taste something real and authentic, something that isn't curated, something that isn't put together to impress somebody, but man, this is for you. This is so you can meet the Lord, and the Lord doesn't curate perfection. He is perfect. That's what's real. That's what's good, is that you don't have to be all these things that the world says you have to be. You get to be his son. You get to be his daughter, and he is a king, and he wants you in his family.
And then giving them a chance to have a voice.
Exactly.
It's one of the things we read recently in a book by Alyssa Childers about deconstruction is, do they have an opportunity to ask questions?
Exactly.
And you don't always get a chance in a big group setting to ask questions, but in a small group, you have an opportunity to talk about the things that were said and ask questions and present doubts, and you have people that are willing to walk alongside of you. And I think a lot of youth pastors, I know I was this way in the beginning. I thought that the kids didn't want more adults around. And that's not true at all.
Mm.
They want adults around that are going to love them.
Right.
And that's what I've just seen, that these adults, they see these kids as being an extension of their family. But we also don't let them stay with the same group from 7th grade to senior, because we need them. I was listening to a seminary class one time, and an online seminary podcast, and it was saying that every youth kid needs 3 adult relationships in their life. And I was thinking, whoa, I can't have 300 adults here to help with a 100-person youth group.
Right.
But the idea was that if they hear Jayten, Chris, and Andrew all saying the same thing, they're, as their parents, they're going to be like, oh, that's maybe truth.
Right.
And we're really coming alongside the parents to where the parents' biblical worldview that is being expressed on a Sunday morning and a Wednesday night, it's like, oh, wow, maybe this Jesus thing is legit.
Sure.
And Jayten's making crazy choices to follow Jesus even against hard times. And Chris is investing in the kingdom work in this way. And my parents are doing these things. That's what helps these kids not fall away later.
Right.
Because they're like, this is authentic. This is real. You could say it's false, but these people believe it's real.
Right.
And that's where I think it's such a beautiful picture that youth group can kind of stand in the gap against the wave and the current of really deconstruction and doubt and criticism that the world pushes back against us.
Everybody's screaming in their ears right now. The whole world is, they're getting different messages. And when the authentic people, like the real people who are investing in your life, who aren't just a voice on a screen, who aren't just a teacher that they see 40 minutes every day in a classroom, but it's like, this is someone who cares about me. They've shown that. They've built a relationship with me, and they're encouraging me towards this. Maybe it's the real thing. And we're not just screaming it in their ears. We're living it out before them. Right. It's not just a message. It's life. And doing life with these kids and these students is one of the most important things. And that's kind of going back to having small group leaders and adults that do that. They get to do that and be that. And man, just praise God for it. It's
yeah, and it creates a skeletal sort of system that can hold the weight of more kids. Where for me and Tara, when we were going through ministry together, we couldn't top really 40 kids because, and I was literally on the campus. I was bivocational all the time, and I'm on the high school campus with them, but I couldn't care for and love on more kids than that and do a good job of it. But as God introduced more adults into the mix, and seeing that was like, wow, well, they can handle 10 and I can handle 10, and we have 20 adults. We could handle 200 kids without any one of us getting overwhelmed. And sometimes it's funny to think about the scale by which we do things anymore, because I've seen people at, like, thinking of youth camp where they're freaking out about their 15 kids and all those things, and then we got 75. But what we've really done is learned how to delegate. And
right.
Something happens to a kid, and his small group leader is immediately the one who goes and deals with it. Doesn't always have to be you or me. It's they have a responsibility and a love for these kids that they want to go deal with it, and then we trust them, equip them to do that. I think that's a beautiful picture of the body,
right,
working together.
Well, and trust is huge. That, like you said, trust. Like, you have to trust your leaders, and if you don't trust your leaders, why are they leading? Like, that's kind of the idea of, if, like, you bring in people that you can trust, like it. That was one thing the other day when we did kind of the salvation thing with the students and the people kind of gathered around. I trust these leaders to be able to have that conversation with these students. And so, like, that's such a huge thing.
So how do you build that trust? Like, what is the way you've built that trust? Because it has to be through relationship. But how have you built that? Have you done a good job of that? Are you still growing in that area?
I'm definitely still growing in that area. Like I said, leading leaders is something I'm having to learn right now. I bought the book Lead by Paul David Tripp. I'm really excited to read it because I'm like, this is something I really need to know. But like you mentioned, like, building relationships, that's huge. That's such a big thing. If I don't know my leaders, if I don't know what's going on in their lives, then I have no idea what they're bringing to the table. And you have to understand it. And it's kind of like inviting someone to a potluck, but saying, this is kind of what we're expecting. Like, you bring what you make. You bring yourself. We want you, but our leaders need to be able to be people like this, people of character, people of biblical standing. Like, do you actually love the Lord? Like, if you don't love the Lord, you probably shouldn't be leading students towards the Lord. And so that's a huge thing. I know that there are some times where I'm thinking like maybe I should do some trainings, maybe we should do this, and that's on my docket. That's on
Yeah.
things that I want to do with these leaders, but at the same time, it's also like I can schedule a meeting, but these are adults with lives, adults with kids. Like, can they make every time? And so it's a lot of that is the communication aspect too, and like relationships can't be built if you're not communicating, and so communicating with leaders is a big thing too, and being someone that they can trust to go to if they have an issue. W One thing I love about these leaders is that if most of them, if something is wrong or if something is like they're concerned, they'll bring it to me. They'll tell
Mhm.
me like, "Hey, like a kid said this. I think we should talk about this." Or, "Hey, like I don't know, like if I'm really good with this age, like maybe I should be with a different age of kids." And I love that. I want that. That's part of being a team. It'd be like if I was struggling with something going on here at the church and I went to you with it. Like, hopefully, like, as a leader, like, we can take that, we can take criticism, we can take,
Mhm.
constructive criticism would be great, that's
Yeah.
really nice, always better, but we can also take those moments where it's like, "This isn't really working, can we talk about this?" And so, I think that's been a big aspect of it is communication and trust in that.
Yeah, I think trust is huge, and it's come up multiple times in just episodes as we've been talking about discipleship and talking about these things. And training is important. I think that's one of the things that I had to grow in as well is training how to handle trauma, how to keep your facial expressions normal when they tell you that they're cutting
Mhm.
or that they have suicidal ideations, and be
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yes, that's a struggle. And then you go out later and scream and yell and cry, and then go to us and tell us what it is so we can help
Yeah.
you deal with it. Like, it's not all on you. And them feeling that support enables them to truly have that freedom to push into kids' life and find out what's really going on, because these kids are dealing with things that are so challenging
Yeah.
in their life. And so thank you
Absolutely.
for standing in the gap.
Absolutely.
We're so excited to have you here, and blessed to see you and baby Peter,
Yeah.
um, the love of our lives, the
Yes.
church life route, the
Mhm.
favorite of all the church members right
Yeah,
now.
it started out whenever time people would see me, they'd ask how Amy is, and now every time they see me, they ask how Peter is, so I'm just getting lower on the totem pole, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Isn't that so humbling when, like, hey Chris, how's Tara?
Yeah.
She's great, and I'm okay too.
I'm
Like, I
fine, I
mean,
guess.
but it's go great. We have great wives and great families
Yeah,
as well. And so,
yeah,
anyway, I want to pray for you.
absolutely.
Thank you for jumping onto the boat
Of course, thanks for
and
having me.
riding through the rough waves and steering the ship. We're
Thanks for
excited to
not
have you in the gap. So
speeding off without me.
we that's how you water ski.
Yeah,
We just put you on the back and let you go.
just throw me a life.
We might have just drug you under the water for a little while, but we got you above and we
I'm
got
on
you
the boat
going.
now.
We got you on the boat. So let me pray for you, Lord. Thanks
Yeah.
so much for Jayten and Amy and baby Peter, Lord. I thank you for his ministry here at Fellowship Church and the way that he stands in the gap for these youth to experience you, to know the gospel, Lord. I thank you for the way that you have gifted him in teaching the Bible and studying your word and making it clear to others, Lord. I pray that you'll continue to grow him in leading leaders. You'll continue to grow him in training and encouraging these leaders that are on the front lines of these kids in their lives, Lord. So protect our youth kids from the schemes of the enemy that are in the world, from a world that screams deconstruction and a world that screams you're not living as you should because you're living for the Lord. And I pray that you'll strengthen them and guide them. Help us to be a part of that process as well, Lord. So thank you for this time and this conversation. We give you all the praise in your name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate you.